Good evening,
Right.
everyone, and welcome to the 20th day of the New Earth Summit, now in its third year. India's first integrated summit on solutions to our problems in health, food, farming, and environment. I'm Darrell D'Souza, convener of the New Earth Summit, your host for this evening, and I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and to our audience. Also, on behalf of our 10 Earthkeeper groups in India and overseas, and we express our gratitude to you for taking out time from your busy schedules to be with us this evening and to share your insights and experience so that all watching this live webinar and its recording later may benefit from the holistic science and wisdom being presented on this platform that will help us all co-create a beautiful world. So our topic for today is Natural Food and Farming Committee fixing our toxic food supply chain. So first we will just get into the toxic food part of it and understand that. And the latter part, we will go into what can a committee do and how should it be structured to solve this problem. So I will start with introducing panelists now. Rahul Goswami is a former advisor to the Center for Environmental Education in Himalaya under the Ministry of Environment. He is also a former advisor to the Ministry of Agriculture central government program on traditional cultivation knowledge. For the last 30 years, he has been documenting traditional knowledge systems in India and adjacent parts of Asia, and in doing so, developed a keen interest in rural crafts, artisans, and handweaves. For the last 12 years, Rahul has been a UNESCO expert on intangible cultural heritage in Asia. Our second panelist, Irfhan Shaikh, previously worked in the media field as promo producer with MTV, VH1, Channel V, Zoom, and later on as an independent producer, director, creative head, working with advertising agencies, TV channels, and corporates. Finally, he quit his job as head of creative and content strategy planner with TV channels, an advising agency and media house to proudly upgrade his life as a vegetable vendor. He understood the importance of healthy foods much earlier in life and hence invested in a farm in Karjat much before buying his own home. An ardent animal lover and nature lover, involved in animal welfare and nature, he relocated to Goa with his environmentalist wife and children to give back to the motherland. He believes the need of the hour is to promote organic farming and to create markets for the farmers. So they are all, I mean, Irfan and his wife, they are busy aggressively setting up markets across Goa to promote sustainable farming and farmers, having completed solutions for organic farming right from the soil conversion to final pest control solutions to marketing the products. So for the first hour of today's webinar, I have a few questions for our panelists, which will then be followed by question and answers with our audience at 7 p.m. And the audience can also type their questions in the Q&A box below, even before 7 p.m. once our panelists start giving their views. Now, if you would like to receive the recorded video of this webinar, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The New Earth Summit. Now, for my questions to the panelists, I will start with Irfan. We are now realizing that more and more people are suffering from digestive disorders, nutritional deficiencies, and also dying from cancer, with the blame clearly being put on our daily food supply chain that has become unnatural and toxic. So if you could share in your opinion, what are the mistakes that we have made to reach in such a state?
Hello, everyone. Okay, Daryl, I'll quickly go to your question. Your question is why we are at this state now. Okay. See, I believe it all started with Green Revolution. Okay, with Green Revolution came the hybrid seeds. With hybrid seeds came in fertilizers. Thereafter, like the processing of foods using all the bad quality raw materials, and then the whole what do you call that? The chain, the supply chain. I mean, each and every stage. I mean, there's contamination, there's unhygienic condition, and that is where we have reached today. Okay, so it's taken a long while to get here, and today everyone wants like things faster because we think we don't have time and all that. So everybody goes for this process for it's much easier. Anything else you want me to elaborate on this? I think that's enough for now. So I'll take your next question.
No, if you would like to say anything more specific also, besides this, any other parameters that you think have caused this, problem?
Yeah, parameters, see, like whatever, like the last point which I said about contamination in the foods. What we require today is like chemical-free foods, and which is not happening for various factors. Okay, now one of the initiatives which we've been pushing aggressively is growing your own food. Okay, that is what we are doing. So at least you are sure, I mean, that you are not using any fertilizers or manures. So that is where you can start. I mean, I know you can't grow everything, but then at least it will be a start. Out of 10 things that you eat, at least you can grow your own, like, 2 things, and rest you can find from various sources, which we'll discuss later. Okay, so it starts from there. And it's not very difficult to get there. I mean, a lot of people complain about the space, and space is never enough. So, I mean, if you have a small space, you can just start with microgreens or, few plants which are healthy, like, some herbal plants or some few like vegetables which you can grow on your own. So that is one important factor of growing your own foods. I mean, that's where we should start, and then we can take it further. Of course, there are like you are much more worse with so many other things. I mean, all the contamination that goes in the food. Okay, so I'll keep it up to you to discuss that.
Rahul, same question to you, that people are having more sicknesses and cancers also on the rise. And it is being understood now very clearly that there is a direct correlation between the unnatural and toxic food that we're eating. So would you like to add, what are your insights? How has the average person landed in a state where they are getting such unnatural and toxic food?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Daryl. Nice to be once again on your program with the New Earth Summit. Hello, Irfhan. Nice to meet you too. I've heard about some of your work. I've heard about some of your work, and I'm glad that you brought in the point straight away without fuss that a lot of these troubles can be traced back to the Green Revolution, which indeed was and remains a watershed in Indian agriculture, a watershed for the worse. So you're completely correct there. The introduction and the promotion of those hybrids has wreaked havoc in our crop biodiversity. I think also that what you said about every stage of modern food processing being a point of contamination, a point of distortion of the food itself. I think that probably is something that, with your hands-on experience, you could talk about certainly more. I'll tell you from my perspective, which has been dealing with, when I was with the ministry program, dealing with the economics of it. I learned very early that it's really the people who we call the policy makers, who are presented to the public as these are the people who are going to think for you and to direct your life in the same way that they direct your life about where you will work, how you will transport yourself, how much money you will earn, how you will consume energy and so on, that they will also direct life about your life concerning food. And I think this is what is implicit in the idea that there is planning, there is central planning, and now there is corporate planning, which is making all these decisions for you in the name of, as you said, convenience. It is really for the public to be able to confront this decision making, which has been snatched out of their hands, snatched out of our hands, and placed in the hands of those who we have neither elected nor have we chosen to represent what our interests are, especially in the case of food and medicine as well, which we've seen in the last 2 years. So that's completely correct. I think in if we look at a principle, an operating principle of why this has happened and why it has been so successful, I would point to this, starting at around the same time. From Darrell's point of view, where he has been working very hard to create the idea of community, of responsible community, of responsible ownership, I think the point to dwell upon is why have we as a public body, a public collective, why have we ceded our governance, our direct governance, which from our point of view sitting in Goa is villages, and therefore everything that the Panchayati Raj Act gives us plus many others, why have we ceded this to a central government and its organs and its partners, which happen to be very large, rich and powerful corporations? So I think these are the questions that preface everything that we are saying about what has contaminated our food and why is that contamination causing us ill health to this degree. Thanks, Darrell.
Yes, thank you, Irfan. Thank you, Rahul. And I just wanted to show a couple of slides to our audience that I had presented in the earlier webinar, the contamination of our food supply chain. And, we can take it from there. It's a point that I wanted to add, which is one of also the main problems why we have landed up with what we call the food supply chain. As Rahul had mentioned in an earlier webinar, why is there a food supply chain itself? So I'm just going to show a few slides right now to make some things very clear. So this is a picture of Chicago. And right from the time we started building these cities, with what I call concrete jungles with such high population density, now you can see something in the background of the city, which may be the sea. But what also happened is when you create such dense cities, you have to give a very high amount of daily water supply to such cities. And then it became necessary to make dams wherever there are rivers at the upstream to make a dam. So you can take this backside of the picture as, that's a big lake that has been dammed. And when you dam a river, you choke up the water that flows through the river downward. And earlier, all those people or villages that were living across the river downstream, they start getting lesser and lesser water. They are not able to farm, and those villages slowly, whether it's 10, 20 or 30 years, they dry up and die off. So this is one of the major problems, and this is also what Dr. Susan Raj, who was a panelist on one of our earlier webinars, explained. And she is with a campaign to approach the government of India and propose to them to start releasing more water from these dams to the downstream, so that the rivers flowing downstream can get water again, and villages that are downstream can start farming and become revive themselves, because we are all seeing that these cities now have become so toxic that people want to leave these cities and now come to the countryside. So now what does this particular model do? When you create dams, and next to the dams your this population goes on increasing because there is water supply here. uh, what ends up in happening is that the food source, okay, because in the previous picture you could not see any farms over there, so the farms get more and more far away at other water bodies, and farming happens at a very distant location. And because the distance from your farm and your metro cities is so far, it's a 1 day's drive, then you end up in this kind of food supply chain, where now where you have a manufacturer, and then because the distance is so long, then you have a processing unit, then a storage unit in between, then it comes to the retail. So this entire food supply chain has happened because of this development model of damming rivers, creating cities. So you can say this is a reverse chain. For example, you, that restaurant table and your home, you are living in the city, and your food is grown somewhere very very far. So now when there's a long distance between producing the food and you consuming it, then you end up with what is on the right hand side over here. Instead of fresh food, you end up with packaged food that requires preservatives and this entire storage and mall culture. And it is these processed foods that are not fresh, they are not organic, of course, because they got chemicals in them. Then they are not whole foods. So a whole food is something that is a full unit of food, that for example, a cucumber or an orange or a mango. A mango that is juiced and put in a carton is not whole food, because certain amount of pulp and fiber that is left behind, that should have also gone in at the same time, but you're only drinking the juice. So uh, so these unnatural formats of food and the necessity of them having toxic preservatives, chemicals, and all of that have only come from this longer supply, food chain supply. Now, if you were living in a place, in a village, where there is a farm around the place, and you go daily and buy your fresh foods and you're eating them, then you have a daily fresh food supply, and all of these preservatives and all become, and these tins and these tetra packs and bottles all become unnecessary. I have shared before also, all of this packaging material comes from paper, oil, mining, and glass that comes from the sand. So all these resources on the planet are getting depleted, and we are creating all holes on the planet. Why is this happening? Only because we've chosen an unnatural processed format of food. And then, of course, this next slide is about all those manufacturing companies that make all these processed goods. They are pumping out, pollutants in the air and effluents in the uh, soil and the rivers, causing even more damage. And of course, all these factories that run, they create a lot of heat, increasing the temperatures across the globe. And this slide is about, yes, all on the left hand side at least, all the shipping and transporting and carting of all our food, all across the globe, which of course again is so much of metal used to make these containers, to make these vehicles, and all the fuel that is used to run them. So this is what I was talking about, and the whole summit, New Earth Summit, is talking about when you separate your food from consumption and you start having a time delay, that's when all of these problems come in. Um, and in such a scenario, especially for people who are growing their own food, there is no delay from farm to your plate. Yes. Yeah. So this is just one aspect of it that I wanted to present, and have our panelists comment on this as well. Rahul, what would you want to share on this? Uh, and again, I would like to share the same thing what Rahul had mentioned is that these are done by what we can easily call a capitalist people who have set up businesses mainly for money flow towards into the business. Okay, because you put in funds, you want to create more money and profit so you can make a bigger business, and it is looked as a service to people. But for me, this is coming under something that's called the MRTP Act, that is monopolistic and restrictive trade practices. Now, what is that? For example, earlier we had local producers. That's what's happening right now with this Indian Farm Bill and our farmers. You see, where more and more people should have grown locally and supplied locally. You have these corporates who are creating organizations, taking food supply, supplying it to these big cities, and that's why you have this format that is there, where food and a lot of more processed food is there, and which has got to be shipped to other places because of this design that has come. So even it's the same mindset that has caused these cities to be built. Um, so Rahul, is there any way out of it?
Well, yes, the way out of it is the simplest possible way. I think Irfhan and his wife have chosen that way, and you've chosen that way when I've looked at the slide of you holding those pumpkins and squashes and gourds. Sadly for me, I don't have a little plot yet. I'm working on it, and maybe I'll take advice from you too. But that is the only way, and that is the only sensible way, and that is the only feasible way, because as you pointed out, it's ludicrous to imagine that what you hold in your hand in the form of a can or a bottle, a plastic bottle or a glass jar, which contains some substance which began life as a crop or a root or a tuber, has been put through machinery of all kinds, turned into something which has none of its original material in terms of the elements, the 5 elements. It has none of that, and it's presented to you as being food. In many ways, it is probably the greatest travesty that the post-industrial society has been able to successfully pull off, simply because of the separation of community or the separation of population from the places where the population ought to derive its nutrition and its enjoyment of that nutrition. So it's a dystopia that has been deliberately manipulated over generations in order to foster in our minds the mirage, the image that this is what food is and this is what food represents. Nothing could be further from the truth. I was hunting around in that shelf behind me, something that I hope will help illustrate the kind of disconnection that has actually occurred over a very short period of time. I want to show you a page from a book. This is a book that was published by the FRLHT, the Foundation for the Revitalization of Local Health Traditions, which is based in Bangalore. It's called the Bhojana Kutuhalam, which is a relatively recent compilation, late 16th or early 17th century. But the point that I want to make is actually illustrated in this. I'll try and angle the page so that the reflection of the laminated paper doesn't. If you can see this, you will see Okay.
Yes, we can see products over there. They look like tumblers of different types: copper,
Yes.
steel, brass.
Yes. Copper, gold, silver, and as well as earthen. So, of course, I'm just showing it to you on the camera, but I'll read it out to you. What the page says with these illustrations is properties of milk based on vessel of boiling. So you have copper, gold, silver, brass, iron, and earthen vessels, which are to be used to boil milk in order to produce particular or to encourage the gunas, the qualities in milk, which would otherwise not be available to us had we not used this material to actually prepare that milk. And of course, there are the Sanskrit phrases which relate to those particular qualities. Now, this is something that was in relatively common practice even till about 2 centuries ago, which means about 8 generations ago. What this points to is an extremely fine understanding of the qualities of food and the qualities of elements which are manifested in our crafts, which when you put them together and apply heat in certain proportions, then those are healing in so many different ways. And this is, I think, a science which has food at its core, which has been deliberately pushed out of our consciousness by the system that we are calling the food supply chain, which is a complete travesty, as I said, of what food ought to be. So this is merely but one example.
Yes, thank you, Rahul. So now we'll go into the next step, which is the solution steps. And then after that, the last would be how would a committee be able to, implement those solutions. So I'm just taking notes. So first thing I got is that people who have some land should grow their own food, because that will ensure, of course, that the produce is natural, it's organic, and it's fresh that comes to you. So in a world now where what is dominated by the pandemic, where food supply is getting short, so that also makes sense that if you have land somewhere in your native place or around your where you live, so it's a good idea to start growing your own food, and for food security, purity, and access of food. So yeah, so the first thing, of course, is land and water. So I'm taking down that as the first step. Then the next step, Irfan, you had shared a couple of points.
Yeah. First of all, very nice presentation. You can hear me, no?
Yes.
I like that slideshow which you did. Nice. Very well explained about the supply chain, which is a major cause actually, Then another term which you use is capitalism. That is exactly what it is. I mean, that's where we are getting. See, I've been from the advertising industry, I've been from media. So I know how we used to create demand for certain foods. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, for example, I mean, let's say earlier, like you had said, eat local. Yeah, of course, everything, like every food is area specific. It grows well there. That means it's also good for you. But because of the demand created by by criminals like us in advertising, who created the demand for other foods. One simple example I can give you is the local oil, like coconut oil. When the corporate mafia came to Goa, they said coconut oil is bad. But at the same time, we go for like olive oil and all that. Now, coconut oil is one of the best oils all over the world. It has a lot of demand elsewhere. But here we would go for olive oil. So those kind of things happen. I mean, like where everybody was, out to make money. So like all this processed food, which was easier for your kitchen habits, your eating habits, and also creating demands for this. Okay, now should we start talking about solution or like? Yeah, Daryl, over to you.
Yes. So Yeah, the next point, obvious point, what I put down is the message to people is that stop using processed foods completely and instead go buy fresh fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, peas, roots, grains, whatever you have to have on a a regular basis. That means go to your fresh food market. So this will actually help you, first of all, not eat any more toxic processed foods. Secondly, uh, because frankly, those food format needs to be on the shelves and remain in those malls and date expire because they are not good for your health. So you have to stop bringing food through that food supply chain and start increasing the volume through the fresh food supply chain. So go buy fresh foods. Now the second thing is, of course, it's about organic. So in fresh food, you try and ask and try and source what is fresh. And like Irfan said, local, seasonal also. So that is another point. And any more points to these three, four?
So I was just saying, like, if you look at it technically from the scientific point of view, I mean, there are some 117 parameters to the organic. But from the means, if you just look organic food, is what? When you do nothing, it is organic. It is as simple as when you grow your fruit. Is what organic is. Now, like again, like eating local. Like see, like I told you, certain foods are specific to certain region, and if they can grow well, they're also good for you, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that is what. Now, like, can we talk about like solution? I mean, like, whatever there is. Can I go ahead?
Yes,
And
please.
I
Please go
think
ahead.
we've already discussed about the problems and
Yes, yes. Please go ahead with the solution.
yeah. See, to start with this, yeah. Yeah, one is eating local. I mean, that is there, which means also cutting the food supply chain. So when we say mid local, there has to be markets, and that's exactly what we are creating. It's only about buyers, also about sellers. For sellers also, when they sell their produce elsewhere, automatically the price will go up. So if there are markets in each and every region, each and every village, where they can buy all their foods, if they get all their foods, I mean, if we cut down on the supply chain and we cut down on the cost, so and also, I mean, like you're eating like region specific, so definitely will be healthy. I mean, starting from growing your own foods to buying local. That is what you need to understand, and you also need to understand this. All these foreign, the hype created around these foods are not really good for you. That is another education which the consumers need. More or less, these are the same nutrients we get in like n number of fruits or vegetables or some foreign foods. But it's like what should I say? Everyone likes to talk about a kind of foods they have like from abroad and all the processed foods they get from there, all the supplements they get from there. If you go to the village, I mean, they're healthy for so many years. Because they
Yes.
didn't have access to internet. I mean, I think that is also a major, you know, because once you know about this, then once you have the buying capacity, you want to buy those things. You want to stand apart. Okay, I don't eat rice. I eat like maybe pasta. I eat noodles, pizzas. It's also that statement you're trying to make. You know. Yeah, Daryl.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Irfan. So I'm noting
I'll
out
leave
down.
it to you now.
Yeah, I'm noting down those two points as well. One clear thing that you said is to have more organic markets all over the place. In a village or a city, many more fresh organic markets, so people have more access to it. And the second point is that in those markets, we should, if it's grown by people, farmers in that area, it should be local produce. It should be seasonal produce because that is good for health, and we should not actually be trying to seek out foods from far off places which are not in tune with our season, and right, and especially the ones that travel a long time only because they can travel only because they've got preservatives and all in that. So yes, point clearly taken. So now I will just come to, how are we going to implement these things? Because the current system, I mean, we have got a lot of government departments and a lot of bodies which have so far been managing our food supply chain. And unfortunately, this is the state we are in. So obviously, whatever they've been trying to do, uh, with regards to food and health, that has not succeeded. So now perhaps people who are innovative, who have the solutions, should come together and form a committee. So, like for example, if we talk of Goa, so we are just saying that, the Natural Food and Farming Committee of Goa. And of course, the same thing can happen at different states. So this is the model what we are going to talk about and giving ideas to people and what we are intending to do to take things forward. So the first question is, what kind of people should come into this Natural Food and Farming Committee, whose agenda is basically to see that there is fresh, healthy, local, seasonal food supplies in different parts of the city or different parts of the state, which should directly translate to better health for the people. So what kind of people should be in this committee? Rahul, if you could talk about it.
Well, I can immediately suggest those kind of people who should not be in the committee, which
Yes,
is
please, go ahead.
number one, politicians. Number two,
Absolutely. Correct. Correct.
and number two, the people who politicians work for,
No, absolutely. I was waiting for this.
which is the big corporations and their agents, should be kept out of these committees forever. So that's the main thing. Once we do that, then we'll have lots of space for all kinds of other people who have real ideas and real experience. We need a lot of representation from those who are actually running their own households, because they keep track of, especially young and working mothers. Young and working mothers, why? Because they keep track of what their children's needs are, and they're working. So we have to bring in the aspect of, don't get seduced by the idea of convenience, because that is the road to health disasters. And those are the kind of people we need. We also need elderly people. Generally our social profile is going up the age band, not coming down. It's going up the age band. We have more older people in society than there were 20 to 25 years ago, and their food needs are completely different from, for example, what the National Institute of Nutrition imagined was the case 30 years ago, and whose advice is still being pushed by our government departments. We do need nutritionists of the kind that you have brought into your sessions, and who are quite vocal in your various lists. So we need people with a lot of hands-on experience in either managing the food needs of their families and therefore the health needs of their families, those who are looking after older people as well, who may be invalid or otherwise in need of special care and assistance. And of course, we need a good representation of genuinely local and therefore by default organic or regenerative cultivators, who can advise us about the seasonality of what they grow and what they can supply to our vados and our panchayats. That's what I'd suggest.
Yes, that's wonderful, Rahul. Now I'll ask Irfan. Irfan, that you've heard what Rahul has said. Any more categories of people who, again, you can start with, who should not come in the committee and who should come in the committee?
I absolutely agree. I just love the way Mr. Rahul put it. I mean, the people who are not required in the committee. I just love that. And there have been committees, like you said, and they have succeeded, but they have not succeeded. They have pushed what they want. not for the people. I made you here, why succeeded through this healthy lifestyle. Mr. Rahul very well said, I'm the kind of people, I'll just add like farmers, and patients once time. I mean, they're in a better position to explain, what they have gone through, who are still able to survive. See, Daryl, you're the very good example, and where you come from, and how you came from. You today, you understand the importance of these healthy foods. A lot of people take it for granted.
So, I mean, if you could hear me, I was just trying to add like farmers and local growers to this,
Yes.
to the list which this one has already mentioned. And also some of the patients who have come through the hard way of going through certain disease and all that, so who have got like second life. I mean, they are the very good example to tell us what happened and why it happened and how things can be better. So if those kind of guys can be in the committee.
Yes, I'll go back to Rahul. Rahul, anything more that you thought of?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Daryl. Yes, there is something more, which really relates to what one of the points that Irfhan brought up. He brought up the point about here in Goa, and in fact in the Konkan region, and in fact in many districts of South India, on the East Coast, all the way up to even Odisha, we are very used to using coconut oil, and coconut oil is a generational heritage for us. It is not merely a cooking medium. And the allegation that coconut oil was bad for our health began to be made in the mid 1970s. And once again, it was the WHO which had said this, in order to assist the import by our countries of oils from the northern regions, that is places like Canada, places like Northern Europe, which were wanted to export oils which had nothing to do with our eating cultures, with our cuisines, and with the manner in which we prepared our foods.
That's right.
And this was a concerted campaign that was run in our part of the world, not only in India, but in every single country which had an indigenous edible oil tradition, including coconut oil. So this ran for at least 20 years, and the effect of that was catastrophic, because an entire generation grew up thinking that coconut and other oils which are native to us were not good for us and were unhealthy. Completely wrong, utterly false, and peddled by one of the biggest UN agencies. So what has happened now is that there has been a welcome revival in the understanding of our own edible oils, but
Yes.
the question is whether it is too late or whether we can still do something about it. And what I wanted to tell you is that, in fact, by the early 1990s, India was largely self-sufficient in being able to grow and supply its own edible oil needs. Thereafter, India joined the World Trade Organization, the WTO. Immediately after that, what was called a domestic oilseeds production program was started by the Ministry of Agriculture. And what has happened from then till now is that today, that is as of the year 2020-21, our demand for edible oils is met through 60% of it being imported. And of that 60%, a big chunk of it is palm oil, which comes mainly from Malaysia and from Indonesia, which is completely alien to our culture and is a carcinogenic material. It is a direct health hazard. And this is the extent to which we have come. Fortunately, if we decide we don't want to have part of this global supply chain, which is feeding us with hazardous material like palm oil, we have an abundant supply right here sitting in our villages and growing at the top of coconut trees. All we have to do is train people to go up, cut those nuts down, send them down, and turn them into the oil that we need, which is happening. We do have a thriving local coconut oil industry, and please, for heaven's sake, everybody, please just buy your coconut oil locally. Your money, if the general, I mean, we've been buying it, my wife and I have been buying our coconut oils locally from the time that we've been in Goa. Today, the price of a bottle is, depending on who's selling it and what they have gone through, is between 175 to 250 rupees a bottle. And it is much better than spending half that money on an oil which is terrible for your health, which is definitely going to cause you all sorts of autoimmune diseases as you grow older.
And yes, just a point to mention also, because I have a few coconut trees. If you want it for oil, then you don't even need to send anybody climbing up the tree. You see, the coconuts fall down when they are ready. In fact, this morning I picked up one just outside my house, and those are good enough, to make the coconut oil. Even the coconut flesh that we, take out and scrape and put it in our vegetable dishes, right? That also comes from coconuts that are fallen. It's only when we want to have tender coconuts, right, that we need to send somebody up the tree. And that is once again taking out a fruit when it's not completely ripe and done its time. So yes, then even with coconut trees, it is convenient to make coconut oil. And yes, completely agree with you, because I also have, I had read about some years back about this entire misinformation campaign. So that's the question, that these, foreign overseas organizations, they bring up all these misinformation campaigns. They force us to, buy their products. And in this country, we have nobody blocking that for two reasons. First of all, it is not the fact. I mean, our people were using oil and they were fine. And the second is that from a nation, why are we, importing something and sending money out of the country when we can have it ourselves? So, and make it ourselves. So definitely there's a lacuna in the current machinery that allows this to happen. And that is, yeah, that's also one of the driving points for us to start managing it on our own with our own committees that understand all of these things. So I just, yes, I'm adding to those points who should be in the committees. Very obviously, seasoned farmers who have been, growing crops in your state, and different types of plantations, where they have good science and they understand about the best growing techniques, which is multi-cropping also, people who know how to create good manure. So obviously food and the farming part of the committee needs to have people who have been in the business and who have done it and have had successful models. So that's what I'm putting. I'm putting, senior farmers. Now, when we come to the, healthy food part of it, yes, I'm taking that point from Irfan and from you also, that, we should have a nutritionist. But clearly, I want to add to that, we should have nutritionists who have learned nutrition in a complete way. That means full circle, which means that they should have learned nutrition and how nutrients flow from the soil, from how you make soil minerally rich. That's the first process. Then how that flows into plants, and how that nutrition flows into the human body. So for me, a real good nutritionist is somebody who has either done this themselves, is a farmer, is a food producer, and then can talk about healthy food, or if they're not doing it themselves, they have got trained in a place that actually teaches all of this. Because we have too many people coming out from institutes that are all done by the Western countries, and that's why the American sad diet, okay, ASD, that has made the whole world sick for the last so many decades, and they have been teaching really bad formats of food and all of that. So so definitely we need people who are scientists and who can prove themselves with, who are proving themselves with putting out the right kind of nutrition advice that transforms the health of people in a very short time. That's what happened with me, 16 years back. Within a year itself, by following the nutritional advice from experience and from research, and just not from these institutes that put out any theory that they want, which is in line with these global businesses and all their business plans. So the second point, I want to add is, I'm maybe a question to you, this Rahul. Should we start, the committee, right? Every committee in its own state. Should they start a state-wise program to teach medical doctors the meaning of let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food? Because that is something that they just heard Hippocrates say, but most medical doctors, MBBS, there is no subject of nutrition in the MBBS course, right? So maybe that's where it needs to start. We need to have a state-wise program with actual people who know about nutrition. We need to form a committee that's, or maybe in the same committee, we need to have people who are farmers, who talk to people who think they know nutrition and find a joint collaboration that is evidence-based. And those people need to form programs where our medical doctors are taught the active meaning of how food can be your medicine and which foods can be your poison, to stop all of that. And then also they would have to educate them about the deeper meaning of why local, seasonal, natural food and whole foods. This whole topic of whole food, that means you gotta eat a fruit in its totality, you gotta eat it a cucumber in its totality, not scraping out the skin and all of that. So I think, what do you think of that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, your aim is laudable. You want to bring these doctors from the allopathic tradition in. I think the question for me would be that, to what extent do we want to pursue the exercise of encouraging unlearning amongst their cadre? I think that is something that especially the last 2 years ought to have taught them had they been observant enough. I really don't know. I mean, it's not that there aren't people qualified from the allopathic medical formal schools who don't know this, but I do think that at some point early enough in their career, they are quickly seized upon by the pharma industry and steered away from any such thought or any such practice. I would say that leave it to them to identify themselves and come forward and become part of it, provided the others agree that they deserve to become part of it, because given the Indian population's tendency to adore anybody in a white coat, it is it can be also a little bit destabilizing for such a community, especially at the smaller levels. In a city, I'm sure people can handle them, but in a village setting, I'm not sure, because the primary health center is still a powerful institution in the village setting or in the taluka setting. So I would say proceed with caution.
Okay. Yes. So yes, taking that good feedback, and I have been doing this, teaching people publicly. Okay, so privately, I had been treating patients and helping them reverse their illnesses, also teaching them all of these about food since 2005. But publicly, I started doing it in 2011 through my book, and then starting of 2012 through workshops in different cities. And I basically did the program to open. Anybody could come and join them. So literally in every workshop, if there were 25 people, I would have about one medical doctor who came in. Some of the workshops had like three or four, and it always turned out to be those people who are more interested, who knew that certain things were lacking, and they could see with integrative natural medicine their own patients were getting cured. I mean, I had some doctors come for my workshop after listening to their own patients, how their patients reversed their illnesses within 3 months of my workshop. Then the doctors were really curious and genuinely wanted to come and learn, what is being taught and how it is to be practiced. So yes, so I perhaps that's the way we have to do it. We don't have to, go after people who, and force anything on the doctors. We just need to do more programs on health. Uh, that of course sick people will come for, and genuine doctors who want to learn, and if they also have. I've treated so many, doctors who have had high BP, cholesterol, and diabetes, and they've come for the workshops, they have learned, and then they have reversed their illnesses. So yes, I think so that means I'm just putting that point down.
Darrell, if you could have a look at the chat, a participant named Som has made a good point.
So this is from Tom, and they're saying that another target audience for this should be children and their parents in schools. If children are made to grow food in schools, they will become the best advocates as they grow up. Yes, thank you. That's a really good point. And all of this education needs to happen in schools, and that's why I have been doing talks in schools as well on healthy food. And definitely, we need to have more people, speak in the schools and give them literature and books that will help the younger generation to learn about healthy food.
See, one of the major point which I want to make here is about the doctors. You said include doctors in the panel. See, one of the major point which I want to make here is when you talk about allopathic doctors, do you know the syllabus that they are not supposed to discuss the diet? Do you aware of this? If they are doing it as a own, and it is unethical towards their profession. It's in the syllabus. So this is one major point which you need to understand. I mean, why doctors, they're supposed to give medicine. It's in the syllabus of the allopathic doctors that they are not supposed to discuss diet with their patients.
So I'm reading out a very nice comment from Ashish Mukherjee, which his suggestion is that alternate medicine doctors, that is, and that's been my experience also. What he said, alternate medicine doctors can be more valuable and healers and farmers of indigenous tradition, such as Darrell and others on the previous webinars here. They are better suited than MBBS doctors. Right. So even I have understood that yoga teachers, Ayurveda practitioners, and any of the Ayush like the Siddha, Unani people also, they are more open to, even homeopaths are more open to understanding food and how food can heal you. So definitely taking that point too. And yes, so I've already covered one point that yes, we should do. So this committee, should the committee organize more disease reversal programs all over the state? which specifically focus on how to cure illnesses with food. That means highlighting which are the bad foods that one should stop, which are the good foods that people should eat. And this was one of the webinars that I did in on the New Earth Summit. I think last year. You can find it in the YouTube channel. So I guess if we do more of those and make it more, known to people, then they will also they stop their consumption of all these processed foods. I'm just taking a question from the Q&A because I saw it, and it was Som who asked, you said we should stop eating processed food. Will that apply to our traditional methods of our drying and pickling? In these ways, our ancestors used to make things available off season. Some essentials like onion and potato had its own method of natural storing. Yes, so you're right. So when I'm talking about processed food, I'm talking about processed food, and then here's a key word, stabilizer. So I'm talking about processed food that have got synthetic preservatives, and especially these substances called stabilizers, which are chemicals. And I explained in a previous webinar that it is artificial taste enhancers, smelling agents, flavoring agents, along with synthetic preservatives and stabilizers, which are the master chemicals, which cuts off the cross reaction between the other chemicals. So it's literally atomic warfare going on in the tin. I'm talking about those processed foods that we should stop. So all processes that are natural, traditional, and we do it by tradition because it has come down to to 1,000 years, and it is found to be healthy. So definitely yes. So I'm not talking about those traditional process methods. Definitely we can continue with them because they have stood the test of time to be healthy. Now,
Well, may I just add something there, Daryl?
yes.
So this is an important point about what is meant by to process a food. And it is, in fact, if we look at the traditional kitchen, our rasoi was used not only to prepare a fresh meal, but from time to time, according to the season, to also be able to prepare what was the surplus from any crop of fruit or tuber or root in a way that exactly that it could last for another 2 to 3 months beyond that season, and of course be enjoyed. For example, the many varieties of farsan that are found in Gujarat and Rajasthan are innumerable examples of exactly this. So farsan is a way to take the legumes, the pulses, the legumes, and give them a life beyond the immediacy of a fresh food. And of course, their culinary arts are what gives them the spices and the flavors that makes them so enjoyable. And it's exactly the same, for example, with the famous banana chips from Kerala, which, by the way, are fried in coconut oil. So we see that what we call the preservation of our traditional foods beyond the immediate time frame is something that is culturally relevant to us. Once it goes into, however, the industrial supply chain, that is when the distortions and the contaminations arise.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're very right, Rahul. I'm just putting forth another comment by Irfhan. What he says that allopathic doctors are not allowed to discuss diets with their patients, even though it is there in their syllabus. They are supposed to treat patients only with medicine. So that's the format of working. But yes, I do appreciate those genuine doctors who really want to advise people on diets, and they do it. whatever they will say, don't have fried foods or limit it to the minimum, or get off red meat or reduce your amount of meat. So yeah, definitely appreciate it. And then another comment from Irfan is there are various nutritionists and different diets which are contradicting. So settling in one particular diet is difficult. Now this is the conception that we have been clearing for people over the last 3 years of the New Earth Summit. Uh, the many diets come from these universities that create the confusion themselves. So if you are in a particular locality and if you are looking at seasonal and fresh food and natural food and whole foods, then yes, the science is not so complicated. I have detailed this in the food master class also. That is what is food for human beings, which is the top level, which is what is food for human beings and what is not. That is across all human beings. Then we come to the local place, and then we see what is local for that place. And the third level is what is if you are sick during that time, what are the foods you should not eat, and which are the supplements or healing foods that you should eat. And finally, the last level is to fine tune. You may be healthy and all to fine tune your your energy and get to optimum health. It's finding out what is your body type, and this is the 5,000 year old of old science of Ayurveda, which tells you what is your balance of the as per doshas, what is your healthy diet. So it is not so complicated if you go into real nutritional science. But if you go into these many models that are taught around the world, definitely, and that is what has created a lot of confusion in the mind of people. So I advise everybody to watch all the videos of the New Earth Summit on nutrition, and you will get very clear on this topic. Then of course, for your own situation, probably you need to speak to somebody and take their advice for your own health condition. Now, yes. So this comment is from Irfan. Ultimately, it's about going back to our local foods, what Rahul has said, and cut the wastage of resources. And this next point, Irfan has made already, that is set up more local organic markets, and so people have access to food, healthy food. And yeah, so another point that I want to make is suggestion, which is for the committee to take up, is something that I tried to work with a friend about 2 years back. That is every city, region, or state. Why don't we have a website, or at least one common website in India, which shows that for this locality, what is the local and seasonal and heirloom food, and publicize that on the website and say for this season, and this should come from the traditional knowledge. Why on a website? Because that website access has to happen for the people as well, and for the farmers. So the current problem is that people living in a state do not know their traditional foods and their seasonal food, because they're going at the malls and getting all this rubbish from all of the world. So the people are the first one who need to be educated and need to go to this website, because even if a farmer knows what is grown traditionally and he starts growing it and he tries to sell it in the daily market, the public are not going to pick it up because they don't know anything about those foods. So first I say we got to create the demand, and then when there's enough demand, then the producer will supply. So I think this is a very important project. I think for Goa, if there's no kind of all across India website, I would be very happy if somebody takes up this work just for Goa. And of course, like in every state, you can do it individually. Get this knowledge, start publicizing it, and putting it on social media as part of healthy nutritional information. So I would really say the committee has to take up this. because it'll take care of two, three things. One is that through this venture, people will get local, seasonal produce, and then the business also, right? The money flow stays in your state, and so it's people helping people. So basically, the consumers of all of these fresh foods are helping the farmers. So the local economy starts, getting better and better. Now it is so surprising and shocking that all our, uh, uh, agricultural bodies of each state in this country have not been doing this work since decades. And I think this is one of the most basic important things they needed to do if they were saying that they are working for farmers. Rahul, would you like to comment on this?
Sorry, Darrell, I couldn't get the sentence where you said the agricultural bodies of the states.
Yeah, so what I mentioned is that this information of what is local, what is seasonal, what is healthy, to be publicized to the public, and so if these state agricultural bodies that we have across this country, if they say that they want to help the farmers, then this is one most important thing that they should have done to help the local farmers with the heirloom seeds, with the healthier produce, with local season organic or whole food.
Yeah.
They should have been publicizing this, all of this in the newspapers, for example, or on Doordarshan on the TV channels. I have never heard of something like this being done since the last 50 years.
Well, Darrell, having seen the way this great big monolith called the Ministry of Agriculture actually works from the inside, and also having seen the very firm hold of the crop scientists who for whom the benefit of the Kisan is, I can assure you, is very far away from their minds. I am actually happy that this has not happened, because the reason is because every single species that becomes known to our formal agricultural establishment is one more species added to the gene pool of India, which can be robbed and taken away from us. And this is what has been happening ever since the 1950s, and in as long as we have been independent as a country, and in more blatant ways prior to independence. So in some way, although the machinery of government is meant to be there to benefit the Kisan, the opposite has happened. So I would prefer, in fact, if this stays away from the government's vision altogether, because over the last 3 to 4 years, under these programs of the central government, for example, called Invest in India, which includes the food processing industry, the Ministry of Food Processing began as you explained, a website about two and a half years ago, which allowed you to look at the district level at what were the primary foods grown there, but not from the point of view of encouraging those Kisans who are growing it or those Kisans who should be growing it, but from the point of view of those who could invest in processing those raw crops and bring it to either a distant Indian market or a distant foreign market. And this is something that runs completely counter to all the principles that we stand for over here, which is keep it local. And especially because of the medicinal and nutritional properties of our foods, we also have to consider an important part of this overall work, which is that keep it safe. By keep it safe means that the ownership rests with either the farmer himself or the community in which that farmer exists. And that is what we call the which is a very poor term, which is the intellectual property of the seed and the growing tradition. That has to remain local, and that has to remain unviolated by the market. This is what is happening, and this is what continues to happen, and that is why we have lost uncountable numbers of varieties of rices and of millets, of coarse cereals such as barley, jowar, sorghum. Several thousand varieties of rice have been spirited away for exactly this reason. So I'd be perfectly happy if it stays away from their view altogether.
Yes, Rahul, I completely, agree with you. I now will just pick up some comments actually, that have been put here. So, yeah, Ashish Mukherjee comments that also in something like organic farming, there are many schools like biodynamic farming, Vriksha, Ayurveda, etc., which are lesser known to typical organic farming too, organic farmers too. These people can add a lot of value. Moreover, experts from different regions are important because growing conditions are very diverse. So, yes, in tune with this, I also had one suggestion, that for when we form a committee, I was talking to actually Irfhan about it a few days back, which is I just asked him, many of us who have been teaching about growing organic have been doing workshops, if I talk about Goa in different places. And we hope that, some farmers can come to it or learn and all of that. But farmers are always busy. So I just asked in the north of Goa and the south of Goa, is there any shop, is there any place where a local farmer, if he's got some problem, that he can go and consult over there. And at that place, can we help him, go organic or give him heirloom seeds, uh, things like that. And Irfan said there's no such kind of center and place that is, available except for private people. Like at this place, people can go and talk to him. Um, but there is no formal structure. So I thought that was a very important thing in different places because many of our farmers they grow, and they give you gouty vegetables, meaning that they will grow, put cow dung and then they will use urea. Now, the only thing is we have to get them off urea. And so if we have one place where any farmer knows that, okay, if I want to improve myself, if I want to do good, and if I want to supply to that market around which is called organic, where I'm not allowed to sell right now because I'm putting urea, maybe he can go over there and get trained. And so a very important process and work of the committee is the transformation of existing farmers from using some chemicals to to going fully organic. So I think this is the work for the committee to increase the amount of demand by doing more health workshops and more things for people. And as people want more, then we set up more organic markets. And then the third part is training these farmers and helping them transition to do organic. Um, so that was in support of this. Then Irfan also says initiatives of organic farming solutions to your doorstep. Yeah, that's what they do at Sulimark. And also what Irfan and his wife do in their setup is encouraging young minds in farming through their program called Eco Next Gen, setting up medicinal gardens in schools, creating demands by educating consumers. Then the next point is they also create network of local organic markets to connect buyers and sellers called Sunimark, that is Sustainable Lifestyle Market. So wonderful. Yes, Irfan, you're doing really amazing work in this, helping farmers and connecting people to farmers and letting that food supply chain flow. So definitely everybody in Goa at least needs to support you, and others also from out of Goa try to please support people like this who are trying to connect farmers and consumers. Now, Som says the government budget allocation for chemical fertilizer subsidy and to the whole gamut of organic farming tells a sorry tale. Yes, that was on my mind, Rahul. So I want to ask you about that. The entire subsidy that is being given by the government to our farmers to, push these hybrid seeds and grow all of these things that are so-called things for commercial, uh, uh, kind of needs. How do we deal with that? Because farmers will always go for things that are subsidized, and they will continue that chemical farming. So how do we break, this thing?
Yeah. Well, how we break it is exactly what you've been talking about, that is going to take literally a village by village persuasion of those who have plots upon which they are growing seasonal or food grain crops. And at the same time, to be able to create at least 50 to 60% in terms of volume of the demand that they expect to get from their mandi. And why I'm saying this is because during the last 2 years that I worked on the program with the ICAR and the Ministry of Agriculture, we actually created these models for a few districts in places like Maharashtra, North Karnataka, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and so on. The idea being that let us reduce the amount of food that is moving around unnecessarily all over the country and keep it local, and ensure that the money that the farmer expects is fulfilled. But there's one thing which is quite important, which I want to bring to your notice here, is that as far as the agricultural economics is concerned, the average farm household is in a recurring cycle of debt from 1 year to the next, from one season to the next. And that is really one of the reasons why we saw for more than 20 years until around 2015, the great tragedy of modern India, which is nearly 300,000 farmers, many of them being cotton farmers, taking their own lives, committing suicide, killing themselves on account of debt that was crippling, that they could not get out of, and therefore they decided to just leave everything and kill themselves rather than try and deal with it, which they couldn't. This is something that it is the eternal shame of India that this has happened, and which the implications and the consequences of it are still not properly discussed by us, and this has to be addressed by any such committee, any such group of people, that here is a person who is growing food which you eat, and he is driven to death because of this indebtedness. Why has this happened? In 2019-20, the National Surveys, or the survey organization which does the regular surveys of our labor, farmers, and so on, their estimate was that we have about 170 million rural households. Now, in 1991, the number of rural households that we had was just over 100 million. So in the intervening period, 30 years, these are the number of rural households we've added. This does not mean rural households whose income derives only from agriculture, but rural households. What does happen with regard to the question about subsidies is that when you entrap a Kisan household into the formula of inputs, subsidies for seeds, subsidies for machinery, subsidies or subventions for lifting the crop, and then the insurance game on all this, which has become much more visible in the last 6 to 7 years, then what you create is a very vast base of consumers for agricultural finance services. And this is invaluable for the multinational finance corporations. So it has nothing to do with food security, and it has nothing to do with being able to supply us the food we need as consuming households. It has everything we do to do with creating new consumers for agricultural finance products out of farmers who are not going to escape the cycle of indebtedness. If, on the other hand, we work locally through these committees and say, look, here is a package for you based on the community needs that we've identified. We are going to buy your produce. You will have nothing to do with this whole system of indebting you from your generation to the next, then that becomes automatically attractive. So it needs a very sound economic proposition as well. And this is entirely possible. This has been done in so many places. We don't know about it because that, as you were saying about why doesn't Doordarshan talk about it, Doordarshan will never talk about it.
Yes, Rahul, thank you for that. Getting the point very clear. Yeah, it's this the policies and this economic engine. Now, what they should actually be doing is giving all the subsidies and all of these for healthy farming, which is natural and organic farming. We do see announcements even in Goa of certain subsidy for organic farming, but the entire kind of project of all of these 500 and 1,000 clusters across Goa is not actually functioning. We had this on last year's webinar as well. So yes, it is. We are in that situation where the actual and healthy movement is not getting funded. Now, maybe the only thing is that the people who are putting up these policies and deciding who gets the subsidies, they are the ones who need to be educated that what is healthy food, and if this is healthy food, this is what you should be subsidizing. And maybe it's not only the work of the natural food and farming committee, but also the work of the integrative natural medicine committee as well of Goa or of any other state, because it has to come more from a farming perspective. It has to come from a health perspective. You need to know the health science of some food and to say that this is healthy, and then accordingly the recommendation of those foods. So yes, so that is the kind of work we are up for, where and in a place like India, this is what is shocking. In a place where India, where basically natural medicine has been there for 4,000 years, and we have Ayush, right? So it's not just Ayurveda, it's Yoga, Unani, Siddha, Homeopathy, and so Rifa also. With all of these natural sciences, which all talk about natural food, and they all have these principles: local, whole foods, and all of that. The food that is native to the state and the place. So that's what is so shocking in India, that we don't have a department from these guys who are supposed to be the advisories to the food growers. And so it becomes even more clearer that entire system has been hijacked by corporates, by capitalists, hand in glove with the government. So it is becoming more and more visible to people right now, because we have reached what is called the end game, and the end game is all of us are so sick and dying of cancer. So now the proof is there. If we would say this 20 years back, then people could say, oh, maybe that's not the case. You just got a few cancer people. You just got a few, digestive disorder people. But now, right now, we are reached the end game, and it is time for people to stand up and do the right thing. So yeah, so I hope whatever we are starting now, it gets taken seriously, not only by the people who want to be in the committee, but I hope the general public also who's watching these videos starts, going out and finding such people who they know are experienced and advise them, why don't you, meet like-minded people in the state and form a people's committee on each of these topics. That's how, the general public can help because it's in their own interest. And the public will be able to choose who are the people who have the right sciences who are going to help us. Uh, so I'm just taking up a comment made by Kala where they say there should be more cooperative organic farming where many will benefit by sharing the produce. And that's very right. Yeah, standalone farmers and all, it's difficult, to do the marketing, do everything, and you got small amount of produce. So, and even an organic market, you need good rain. So definitely some farmers getting together, making like a cooperative and then hosting a market close to their cluster of farms. That is definitely the way forward. Harshal says that Dr. Neil Bernard of PCRM.org is advocating vegan diet to treat diseases. Uh, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. There are other doctors in USA who are advocating vegan diet. They are economic driven and do make mistakes in their recommendations. So yes, being part of this whole vegan movement myself, I have seen that uh, of course, like pioneers like this uh, the Gerson therapy, where they were people were following that to eat organic raw diet to reverse cancer and all. That helps a lot of people. So even the vegan diet is cleaning up the diet and taking out all the bad things from it that cause sickness. But at the same time, if those foods are grown commercially, they will have chemicals in them. So that's one aspect in which vegan food could be harmful. Then the second thing, as I mentioned earlier in another webinar on this summit, that if they are grown on minerally depleted soils, they're not going to have enough nutrition. So you'll be nutrition deficient. And the third point I want to add is even in the vegan food, people are mixing too much of food to make it, look amazing or look at tasty. They're mixing many different food groups which should not be mixed. And even in the vegan food supply chain, you also have processed foods that have got chemicals and preservatives and stabilizers. So yes, definitely, I agree with you that many of these doctors who have got popular on the vegan movement and they're having a lot of volumes and become quite a commercial operation. Yes, they do make some mistakes in their recommendations. Agree with that. Here is a comment from Irfhan. Subsidies don't arrive in time, and government and politicians pamper only big farmers, and small farmers are ignored. Yes, very, very true.
Well, there was an interesting question about the fertilizer subsidies, and I just mentioned that these are things which are written into WTO agreements and either modified upwards to the benefit of the MNCs every year, or extended over from 1 year to the next to continue these benefits. And the question of whether it's 80,000 crores or 100,000 crores, we never know, because we get these numbers only through what is mentioned either in the economic survey or the UN, the union budget, when we look at the budget breakup by department, the demands for grants, as they call it. So we never know until those are studied. But what I think the point I really want to make is that, these synthetic fertilizers are a very large part of the world's petrochemical complex. and it is designed to ensure the consumption of the range of goods that are given to us through the oil and gas industry. And that is why they are, from the government's point of view, they are sacrosanct. They cannot be touched, because the power structures between the MNCs and governments are such that we have no control over being able to influence them 5% this way or 5% that way. And therefore, for us, the only eject route or the only exit route is to step out of it entirely and to replace it locally. Because you can spend half a lifetime trying to influence them and you'll be unsuccessful. I know that, I've been there. You'll be unsuccessful. So forget about it, work locally, step out of that whole cycle, that whole treadmill, and we'll all be better off.
Yes, thank you so much, Rahul. And I will questions are over, so I'll end on that note. As one important part of the solution is to, the existing system will continue to function as it is for the benefits of, the players who are just in the money, are in the business of making money off us and not giving us health in return. So when we know that, it's time for us to, get working on it in the way that we want. Instead of complaining so much that this is not being done, that is not being done, these guys are not changing their minds. Let us go ahead and, make these natural food and farming committees ourselves in our state. Let us go and put really experienced farmers, people who have nutritionists who know nutrition well, and people even in the food supply chain, who will help healthy food supply connect between the farmers and consumers. And also this aspect of it, digital connectivity, like I was talking about the website, where something that has never been done, should be done. So such people should be put in these committees. So we've shared all these points here. So that's the request to everyone. Go out there, get the right people in your state, get them to meet, let them watch this recording from later when we upload it on the New Earth Summit, and start working. So let people start working for the benefit of people. And the more and more people that the more organic markets that you set up, the more farmers that you set up for producing and supplying, that just can go on as a people's movement and increase in volume on your state. That's all. And those who want to go and sit with the policymakers, yes, let them go and sit with the policymakers. But I think this movement should not stop, because we are trying to, change such a big machine that has been there right from the time of independence. It's a difficult task, like what Rahul is talking about. So let us go ahead and do our own movement. So I'll end over here. We'll wind up, and big thank you to you for being here today, and also to Rahul. And thanks to audience for hanging in there. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the same time on the same link for day 21 topic, which is Natural Homes and Architecture Committee. And we're also going to talk in it about the benefits of natural homes and how we can publicize, and what are the many benefits that we can share with people, how a committee can be formed to take this forward, and make our living spaces more of natural materials, like we mentioned in previous webinars, that we need to stop digging the earth and taking out chemicals to make concrete and iron bars and all of this metal structures. So please join us tomorrow for that interesting topic, and be part of the movement and knowledge, and please share it with others as well. Namaste and have a good evening.